Before we start this episode of Starpoint, I want to make a quick announcement and tell everybody that I don't have a girlfriend anymore. Because we got engaged. That's right, I proposed to my girlfriend this past weekend. She said yes. In Albuquerque, New Mexico, of all places, I planned a surprise trip for her. Even mentioned somehow to her bosses that she'd be taking this trip. And unbeknownst to her, she had some PTO taken off of her stash of PTO. And so everybody who helped planning this thing was very gracious about it. She loved the surprise. But you guys don't care about that, right? This isn't Go related at all. But now you have the context for why I was in Albuquerque. There was a little puzzle shop in Albuquerque, in Old Town Albuquerque to be exact, and it was called Puzzled. And it had a lot of different little laser cut knickknacks and puzzles that you could play with of all sorts. And I bought this interesting one called an idiot stick, which is hilarious. It's a hilarious puzzle, and I won't spoil it for you guys. But what am I talking about here? I'm talking about why I'm mentioning this puzzled shop, because I was looking through this shop and I was like, oh yeah, let's see what they have here. And in the back, there's a Go board with little laser cut lines and wooden pieces. It was $60. I mean, it's a little pricey for what it was, but it was kind of locally crafted stuff, so I guess that's why the price is a little bit on the higher end. But I was just so surprised to find a Go board, and it had a little description of what Go was. Let me see if I can try to read to you guys what the little placard, or not a placard, but more like just a sheet of paper laying on top of the Go board, what that said. Here, let me just find it here on my phone. The two-person strategy game of Go originated in China before the 4th century BC, and by the 7th century AD was popular in Japan, Korea, and much of East Asia. It became known in the West in the 19th century. We hope you will enjoy this quality all-wood set. And there's a bunch of... They even pasted the official AGA rules of Go onto this piece of paper, this laminated piece of paper. And it's... maybe I'll... post a little picture in the description somewhere if you're curious about what this set looked like. But I just thought that was very interesting, and I wanted to mention that aside from the big announcement. Welcome to Starpoint, the show about Go for Go fans away from the board. And let's get back to my fiance. So during this trip, I was able to sneak in some opportunities to challenge her Go skills. And well, actually, what happened was I was working on some Tsumego problems on my phone, and she would be peering over my shoulder. And mind you, I'm like a 3K OGS player, and she has played like maybe 2 games in her whole life. And she's peering over the Tsumego problems that I'm doing, and she's trying to figure it out before I get the answer. And I'm just kind of shaking my head like, you need to work on easier problems than the ones I'm doing. And so I gave her some problems. Well, first of all, what impressed me was that when she looked at my problem, she thought for a bit and pointed at one of the points, and it was the right answer. I mean, clearly she didn't know exactly why, but I was like, okay, that's a pretty lucky guess. And so I pulled up some more basic problems that were still challenging, that I thought would be challenging to her, but significantly easier than the ones I was working on. And she would think for a bit and get the answer every time. And every time I would ask her follow-up questions, she didn't know exactly what to do to follow up. Sometimes she would get it. Sometimes she would just figure it out on the fly. So clearly she hadn't read it all out before she answered. But she kept on getting it right, like every single problem. Her intuition was just very good. And that was very impressive to me, that she even just got the key points of these problems. But this is what I want to talk about today, how to properly study and do Tsumego. So if you're listening and you want to know the secret of how to actually do Tsumego properly, because you might be wasting time if you're not doing it the right way. I'm going to try to go over what's worked for me, what I've learned throughout all my experience doing Tsumego, and let's get started. The first step I think you need to do, and this is something that came up when I was talking to my fiance, is to know your objective. When you look at the problem, you should know, are you trying to kill something? Are you trying to live? Are you trying to connect up? Are you trying to split something up? That is the first thing you should evaluate about the problem. This is the thing that I think I kind of helped her with when I saw her struggling with the problem. I would say, hey, this is a problem where you're black and you're trying to live here, or you're white and you're trying to kill black, or something like that, right? So before you even get into the problem, you should know what it is. And now everything, all the most important stuff that I know about solving life and death problems comes from Paduk Doctor's videos and the first chapter of Tsuji by James Davies. So let me start with the Tsuji by James Davies. I've mentioned this on the show before, but if you look through the first chapter of Tsuji by James Davies, he does a little spiel on how to read, or what reading really entails. And there's an example problem, and it's a beautiful problem because you look at the problem and there are so many branches to go about, and it's so much deeper and so much more than it initially seems. And you think you have it grokked, but the more you read on, you realize, oh, he's revealing all these different possibilities that I had never considered. And you can kind of see just how many moves you may have to consider when you're dealing with any given problem. And by this same token, Paduk Doctor also emphasizes, he has a series called Road to Be Down Player, which focuses on reading problems. So his view is that Tsumego problems should be done regularly and daily, and you will find that you improve over time. Rather than trying to see if you can improve in an instant just by doing a few problems, you should make it a habit. But he also emphasizes that you need to read everything out through the end before you answer. Okay, a lot of you may know this, right? A lot of you may know the typical advice for life and death problems is you can't just guess. You can't just pick a point and click and see if it worked, and then when it doesn't work, you just kind of go back and say, okay, then I'm going to try something else. This is not doing the problem correctly. That's basically life and death problems 101. So when you do the problem, you not only have to read out the branch that works, but it's always good to also try to read out multiple branches, even if you find one that works for you. So if you follow Paduk Doctor's videos, it's actually very helpful compared to doing online problems because he goes through the branches absolutely thoroughly. And when you find that if you're doing a problem and you don't have someone to guide you through it, you'll kind of just read out what you can read out, maybe look at the solution, and then that's it. But Paduk Doctor, when I watched his videos, I would look at the problem and stare at it for the longest time, trying to figure out all the branches before I moved on, because I knew he was going to cover something that I had never considered, and I wanted to try to map out as many of those things as I could, and ultimately just find the answer to the problem as well. But if you weren't, or if I wasn't meticulous enough, he would reveal some kind of crazy move that I had never considered, and I would realize, oh, I didn't read all of this properly. I just kind of walked right past that consideration. And it's really good to have something like that. And if Paduk Doctor is not the one to provide that, there are some books that will be more thorough in explaining the answers of certain problems. The thing that comes to mind is Chochikun's All About Life and Death, where you look at each life and death problem and then it will go through very many branches. I don't think it's as thorough as Paduk Doctor is, because when Paduk Doctor goes through, he really pulverizes the problem. So to reiterate, don't guess. Try to read every single possibility in that problem before you move on and try to look at the solution. Okay, so here's a tip for, let's say, if you're looking at a life and death problem and you find that your brain is frozen when you first look at the problem. I don't know if you guys have run into this. This is something that I've certainly experienced a lot. I will just look at a problem and my brain will freeze. It'll just be like loading spinner, and I will just look at it and I have no idea what to do because there's just like so much empty space, or it's just like some vague shape without many forcing opportunities. First, I would say just calm down, take a breath, and think for a little bit slowly and find any opportunities that you missed. So let's say this problem has Atari and forcing sequences. That's already an easier problem in my book, right? You should find any kind of Atari that you think are very important, that cannot be ignored, aka Sente, or just very big forcing moves. If you can find those moves within a life and death problem, you can eliminate a lot of branches already. Because if something is unignorable and that's one of the stones, you want to start with that because that will lead to the lesser amount of branching than the other moves. So use that to eliminate moves, and you'll find that once you've eliminated some of the forcing moves, although sometimes, those forcing moves will just lead to the solution, but you'll find that sometimes eliminating some of those forcing moves will clean up the problem for you, and you'll be able to narrow it down to some of the more difficult branches. But initially, just going for the immediate Atari stuff is a good idea. But conversely, don't immediately just Atari as a solution. A lot of these problems will mess you up. For me, I think I mistake sometimes the capturing of a certain group of stones within the problem as the solution to a problem, and I will successfully capture the stone or stones, but then I will get the problem wrong because I was supposed to kill the whole thing, and this only allowed the opponent to sacrifice that group of stones to live in a much bigger way. Just a side note, my favorite problems are the ones that are very difficult but look like do not have many options. I feel like those problems, the ones that are enigmas, that they just, you kind of have like 1, 2, 3 options and none of them seem to work. It makes you really, really think about how deeply you're reading these. These are also the kinds of riddles that I like, the logic riddles, where it just seems impossible and there are no real answers available, and yet it's supposedly solvable. Okay, so if there are no Atari or forcing sequences and you're having like a brain freeze and you're looking at this problems, what else can you do? You can start by following the principles of life and death. These are very basic principles that should be taken kind of loosely. They don't always work, but it is a good starting point because it gives you kind of a methodology of what is most likely to work. The first things that you should do if you're trying to kill something is to reduce the eye space of the group. So you're going to be playing from the outside inwards, and once the group has blocked you off from coming in closer, then you play the vital point. That is a basic principle of life and death. And the reverse goes for how to live. You would want to expand your eye space. Try to reach out and territorially grab more space, and then allow your opponent to block you on all sides before you play your own vital point. This is, again, an oversimplification of this principle, but sometimes it works, and it's a good structure to follow when you're trying to solve a Tsumego problem. And if this doesn't work, you can try finding intuitive vital points. This is what my fiance did. So she looked at the problem and based off not too much information, not too much reading, just felt like certain spots on this problem were the solution. And this just comes from experience. This comes from shape recognition. This comes from doing a lot of Tsumego. you'll kind of have a feeling, hey, this move typically seems to work in a problem like this. You can try those things out and then just try the next logical move for black or white or whoever you're trying to, whatever the problem's presenting, and then see if it works out. If that doesn't work, you can play logical vital points. Where would they have to play in order to live? What are the points on this problem that just seem like very, very important based on the properties of the shape? If black plays here, you know that's alive. So you can kind of say, what if I try playing there instead? Does that kill the group? And you can try to go from there just by kind of eliminating these key points. Finally, if all else fails, try some crazy moves. Sometimes the solutions of a Tsumego are quite strange. You'll be playing things that just seem like DDK moves. You'll be playing things that beginners seem to play. You'll be playing under the stone. You'll be playing things that are like on the first line and you're just like, this would never work. But try it. Try reading it out and see why exactly it doesn't work. You may be surprised sometimes. This has happened to me before, and it's actually quite beautiful when you find something like this because it looks so crazy and out of place. Okay, those are kind of my tips for if you're dealing with brain freeze. Just calm down, don't give up. First, find Atari and forcing sequences if you have them. Then try following the principles of life and death depending on the objective, on how to kill, which is to reduce the ice space and then look for the vital point, or expand the ice space and then play your own vital point to live. And then you try intuitive vital points, which is just points that look kind of like they would work, basically, to simply put it. Logical vital points, places where is very important and may lead to the whole problem becoming neutralized right away. And then finally trying some crazy moves that just do not seem to look like they work. Okay, let's talk about difficulty level for solving Tsumego. It's very important to set the right difficulty level, and I think at this point, my opinion on difficulty level is there are two types of difficulty levels that you should be aiming for. I think choosing the wrong difficulty level can make Tsumego either useless or boring and painful. 5-second problems that take maybe 5 seconds to solve, I don't think this is particularly useful. I think you can kind of just count this stuff as stuff you already know and you're reviewing stuff you already know. And things that are so reinforced already, I think if it's taking you 5 seconds to solve it, then maybe skip these problems. 30-second problems, however, or even slightly less than 30 seconds, I think are a great level of problem. If you find a set where you find that you're solving most of the problems within around 30 seconds, I think that's a great set. If you haven't solved problems at this level before, I think you're in for a treat. Go and try to do a marathon of these problems. It's a great way to speed run through some Tsumego. And what I find is that even though a certain difficulty level is set for a given problem set, you'll find that there will be a few challenges here and there that because you're lacking some knowledge in your Tsumego and life and death knowledge, that you can kind of work on to try to fill in the gaps. So if it's easy, problem 1, 2, 3, and then problem 4, you're taking an incredible amount of time, then you can try to figure out why you haven't really learned this principle and really try to hammer in the knowledge of that Tsumego into your set of skills. Then you got kind of the 2 to 6 minute problem, I would say. These problems are getting into the reading territory. So the two categories of problems I'm going to lay out here are the 30-second problems, the ones that are kind of like they challenge you, but they're fun. They're light, they're fun, they don't stress you out. You can kind of figure them out, but you just need a little bit of thinking energy to do it. Versus 2+ minute problems that you do have to sit down and think about for a while in order to get the solution and really read out branches. This stuff is good for reading training. The 30-second problems are good for intuition and shape recognition and just learning a large vocabulary of Go problem knowledge. And it's very useful. I think if you haven't done problems like that, I really recommend doing that, because I think when I did that with, for example, like Chochikun's Encyclopedia of Death, life and encyclopedia of, it'd be funny if the encyclopedia was just of death, but yeah, no, Chochikun's Encyclopedia of Life and Death, if you can just kind of speed run through those problems a few times, you'll really ingrain those principles into your knowledge of Go. Conversely, if you're looking at the longer problems, the ones where you have to kind of stare at the problem for a few minutes, these are very good for training your reading ability. And like Paduk Doctor said, you have to be doing this at a regular, habitual frequency in order to have this really work. You're not going to feel stronger in a week. You're not going to feel stronger even maybe in 2 weeks. But over time, after a few months of doing this consistently, you're going to find that you're able to read better than you used to be. Okay, so that does it for the tips I have for doing Tsumego. So let's just recap one more time. Know your objective. Are you trying to live? Are you trying to die? What are you trying to do here, right? Sometimes it's not about the life and death. Sometimes it's a Tsuji thing, and there may be a different objective. But know your objective before you go in. Read it out before guessing. Don't guess. This is not a good way to learn. You need to make sure you know what all the branches are before you submit your answer. You need to really think about whether your answer is the right one. If you get it wrong, you not only failed the Tsumego, you failed at verifying your solution and really reading through the problem. If you're stuck on a Tsumego, if the Tsumego looks overwhelming, take a deep breath, calm down, don't give up, find the forcing moves, follow the principles of life and death, and play the vital points. Try crazy moves. And finally, make sure you're setting the right difficulty level for the right purposes. If you're trying to enrich your vocabulary of Go, try doing a speed run of shorter problems, especially if you're kind of stressed. If you're stressed about these and you don't want to do them, it's really nice to do some easy problems. And then make sure you're understanding that if you're doing the problems that take you more than a few minutes to solve, that you're really training reading knowledge. Okay, with all that said, where can we do Tsumego? Places to do Tsumego. Let's start with the Tsumego Pro app. I believe this is on iOS and Android. This is a famous app. I think you may recognize it if you just search for any kind of like Go terms like Paduk. It's called Tsumego Pro, and they have daily problems, and it's basic, easy, or they have like easy, medium, and hard problems. Though when I started using this app, I found the easy problems to actually be quite difficult. What I recommend is, sure, those are fun daily problems, but they do have a good collection of problems that you can go through. They're leveled as basic, easy, and intermediate. Try to get through those problems. I think that basic problems for me right now are pretty easy. Easy problems are also easy, but it's a mixed bag. I will run into a couple of problems here and there where I kind of get stumped. So I'm still trying to work through the easy problems, and then intermediate problems I haven't really touched as much. But it is a good little app that you can pick up and play anytime. They also have paid packs, and I think it's pretty reasonably priced. You just pay a few bucks and you get this huge pack of Tsumego. 101 Weichi. Now this is the kind of holy grail Tsumego resource. Unfortunately, it is a Chinese website with not much accessibility for English speakers. But if you get the Chrome extension, it can translate some of the untranslatable parts of the website. And Telegraph Go and Takumi Go Academy both have guides for how to use this website. So go check their channels out on YouTube if you want to learn how to use 101 Weichi, which is probably the biggest library of Tsumego problems there is. Next, we have OGS puzzles. I'm sure if you play on OGS, you know where the puzzles are. There is a little tab where there's puzzles, and these are just user-submitted collections of Tsumego. I think you kind of have to know which selections are appropriate for you. You'll see kind of the more popular ones are pretty good as well. But one tip I want to give is that if you're going to use this on mobile, one thing you should do is save this website on your home screen so you can just tap on this little icon and it'll pop up and you can have easy access to it. I think I recommend this for this and Black to Play, any other website with Tsumego that you have that don't have dedicated mobile apps. Speaking of mobile apps, Padukpop is also a good resource. They have a very different approach to Tsumego. They have timed Tsumego, where you kind of go for a little run, a short run of Tsumego problems, and every Tsumego problem you only have a few seconds to solve. And I'm not really sure how effective it is. I know that someone from the field interviews episode mentioned doing time Tsumegos on 101 Weichi was very helpful for them in improving. I've tried Padukpop and I've kind of haven't been super consistent with it, so I can't tell you how effective it has been for improving my game. It's actually kind of hard sometimes, and it kind of describes you as a certain rank based on the Tsumego, though I don't think it's super accurate. But anyway, it's a decent app. And then we have Black to Play, as I mentioned. I really like Black to Play just because of the UI design is very clean. I think it does a good job of matching your rating to the difficulty of the problem. And what's especially nice about this is that when you're doing Black to Play, if you just make one mistake, you basically fail the problem. So you're going to rank down. And so that really makes you think about what your answer is before you submit the answer. And you're really rethinking it and really, really reading the problem out before you submit your answer. Otherwise, you're going to fail the problem and rank down. The problem here, I think, with Black to Play is that I think the difficulty level kind of ramps up quite quickly. If you're solving the problems, it will go up, up, up to the point where you're at this problem where you're spending a lot of time reading it out. And I feel like, I don't know, I don't really have a solution for this, but I feel like it can get to a point where you should be solving problems that you may slip up on here and then, but won't take you super long. And getting to those problems, getting through those problems for a while before ramping it up to the next level, I think is helpful. With this system, you kind of just level up really quickly and then it becomes really hard. And then you just kind of, at least for me, I just kind of stare at my phone like, oh, okay, this is a really hard problem. I'm going to just stare at it to see if I can solve it so I can, and it just it's kind of difficult. But anyway, Tsumego Hero is another one. It has a lot of good collections. I'm sure many of you have heard of it, although I don't think it's very good for the mobile experience, although it's fine on desktop. And then, of course, there's also Tsumego Dragon by our own Colossius and the Go Magic Skill Tree, which I've also spoken about previously. The skill tree, by the way, is not just a Tsumego resource. It's kind of like an all-in-one package. If you've ever done Duolingo, it's structured pretty much like that. And it will kind of branch you out into life and death issues, endgame issues, counting, Seki, or I guess, yeah, sometimes it'll go over specific topics like Seki. And then it'll just kind of go through a lot of different things. But among those things is the Tsumego training. Okay, finally, I have this one that I did not ever see before called goproblems.com. And it seems kind of an older site. And when I went and tried out Tsumego on it, basically I clicked on the intersection and a pop-up came up saying, congratulations, you got this correct. And so definitely not the most advanced UI, but it's still a good resource. One final thing, I think we should just take, if you're using these websites, take your rating that they give you, if they give you a rating on any of these websites, with a grain of salt. Tsumego rating is not necessarily going to transfer to your actual Go rating. So just keep that in mind. Those are a lot of resources I want you guys to try out for Tsumego. I would love to hear your thoughts on which ones you like to use, and I hope you have some fun with it as well. Now, a lot of people hate Tsumego. A lot of people do not like life and death problems, and I totally get that. I was definitely there at some point, and I'm still, every now and then I'll think of it as something like a chore. But I do want to say, if you've never enjoyed Tsumego, that the more you do Tsumego and the more you kind of get into the groove of doing it, and the stronger your reading skills become, it actually becomes quite enjoyable sometimes when the solutions are quite fascinating. Sometimes you run into a Tsumego problem, I will solve it, and I'll think to myself, that is incredible. And before I submit my answer, I'll be like, I can't believe that works. I didn't know that they would interact that way. And it's actually just very interesting sometimes. So it helps to have well-curated problems as well. Not all the problems are interesting. Sometimes they're just boring. But a lot of the problems you run into are quite fascinating and unexpected, and they have a little treat for when you solve them. So I encourage you to try it out. I encourage you to try to make it a daily habit and see where that takes you, because I didn't realize I would be someone who enjoyed life and death problems. But here I am, and I really like them sometimes. Not all the time. Okay, it's time for the DDK Advice Corner, and the tip of the day is stop digging a deeper grave ASAP. Okay, this is describing a situation where you have really lost a position of the board, and it's kind of hopeless at that point. Stop trying to make it work. Step back, disconnect yourself. Don't be attached to those stones, and don't fall for the sunk cost fallacy. Don't think that you've invested too much in that area, and play somewhere else. Sometimes, this has happened to me before, a miracle happens later that allows the tide to change. And those stones that looked so hopelessly dead become zombified, and they rise from the dead, or they become very useful to you in the future. You never know, but that won't happen if you keep playing in that area and you just actualize it to the full extent of its hopelessness. So, the tip of the day, stop digging a deeper grave ASAP. And now it's time for some Go news. The Chujo Lanka Cup in Latin America, the second Latin American Weiqi Championship circuit, which was sponsored by the Chinese Weiqi Association, ended with its Venezuelan event on the 18th to 19th on April of this year. So this cup or circuit is quite an extensive event in Latin America, where 10 countries participated in this circuit, and so there was a series of competitions and tournaments throughout Latin America, including Cuba in October of 2023, Colombia and Chile in December of 2023. I skipped 2022. 2022 was Brazil in September, Argentina in October, Mexico in November, and then this year, 2024, Guatemala in January, Ecuador in March, and then finally the Dominican Republic and Venezuela in April. It's incredible how many countries participated in this particular circuit. And I'm just wondering, because I know the Lanka Cup is a world event as well, so I was wondering what the relationship to that was, or if there's any relation at all, or just the name is the same, just to kind of promote publicity for it. I'm not really sure, but I just wanted to mention that. I think it's pretty cool. I think there should be a similar North American circuit as well. I think that'll be really nice. The 2024 Chicago Open champion is Heoran Wang Sevendan, who won $700 at the Chicago Open. It was a 2-day tournament run by the Evanston Go Club in Illinois and sponsored by a company called CMT Digital. Telegraph Go uploaded a couple videos reviewing his games at the event. And then there was also a professional attending the event named Kim Ji-sok, who provided lectures and Q&As and things like that. He was the champion of the 2014 Samsung Cup, and also served as Korea's national team captain from 2014 to 2022. They also mentioned that, I assume run by the Evanston Go Club, they're going to have a one-day 2024 Chicago Rapid event in the fall, which I find exciting because I think we need more rapid events. I think we need more time, short time events. I think those games are quite entertaining to watch. So I hope that event is streamed so I can watch it, or at the very least upload it on YouTube. The 6th Andong Beckham Cup Professional Amateur Open Tournament happened on June the 1st to the 4th in Andong City in Korea. This is a event where it's open to professionals and amateurs, although it's mostly professionals, with 161 total players and 141 professionals and 20 amateurs. Titans like Shin Jin-seo and Park Jong-hwan attended the event. Lee Chang-ho was also there, but he was just attending the opening ceremony. He didn't play. And the time control here was pretty fast. It's 20 minutes and 20-second delay Fisher, or increment Fisher time. It's awesome to see Fisher time. After the tournament attendance this past year, I really warmed up to the idea of doing Fisher, and looking at how things are going, I actually really like the direction that we're starting to use more and more Fisher time in these tournaments. Byun Sang-il was the champion of this event, and it was the first time he won this event and won 30 million won, or 22,000 US dollars roughly. And runner-up was Kang Dong-yoon, 9dan, who won 10 million won, which is around 7,000 US dollars. And now it's time for listener mail. Mike99 writes, I wanted to write about the Dirty Play episode and combine it with a question about stones and how people place them. I had a game on OGS where my opponent and myself both missed a large group of dead stones. Once we passed, the computer tried to remove them. My opponent noticed this also and took back his pass and continued to play and take them. This was a difference of me losing by 50 versus 30, so I didn't worry about it. But it did make me question what to do if I were in his position. Should the stones stay if the computer assisted in removing them, but the player did not notice? He admitted to not seeing them. Also, how would this work on an OTB game if neither player noticed something, or noticed them after both passing and not realizing something was dead? So to address this, I actually looked up the AGA rules on this, and it agreed with what I thought. In terms of the over-the-board rules on what happens. Let me just read it to you. It's Section 10, Disputes. If the players disagree about the status of a group of stones left on the board after both have passed, play is resumed, yada, yada, yada. It's when they disagree. But the game is over when the players agree on the status of all groups on the board, or failing such an agreement if both players pass twice in succession. In this case, any stones remaining on the board are deemed alive. So that means that whatever stones you had there and whatever territory it surrounded, whether, even though it's not technically alive, count as points for you. If it does not surround any actual territory and it's just surrounded by a bunch of dame, then I guess that's considered dame, no points for either player. And so I guess in that situation, that's how it would work, and under AGA rules, this is a limitation of playing online, and this is not, there's nothing you can do about it. If the computer says, oh, this group is dead, and you're like, I didn't know it was dead, but now I know, you can technically just play on, and that's just the nature of online games. It's a very interesting point, and it also transfers to the fact that you can end the game, agree to end the game, realize that you're actually not ahead, and then resume the game because the computer is counting the score for you. Which is, I will admit that I've done that before on Fox. I actually did play this game one time with, in Fox server, it's Chinese rules, and they, we agreed to count the score. I was losing by like 1 point or something. And so I resumed the game, played a dame, and I got my win. It was quite funny. and I'm sure it wasn't funny for my opponent, so I'm sorry, but I had to. Okay, continuing. To bring in the stone placement episode. Someone said that a player was using single convex stones and randomly placing them upside down. Could it be possible for someone to place stones they value as important upside down, like cuttable stones or a stone next to a dame point that needed to be watched? I would think this would be a memory marker and not allowed. Just wondering if you have ever heard of this and wanted your thoughts on these points. Thank you. Well, thanks for writing in, Mike99. I remember many episodes back, somebody mentioning that someone was playing stones, single convex stones, randomly upside down and not upside down all over the board, and it was driving them crazy, and it would drive me crazy too. I don't know. I think it depends on the tournament director on whether they would allow something like that. I don't think it's particularly in the spirit of the game to try to use mechanics like that to remember certain things on the board. But I also think it's not terribly useful. I don't know if I would know a lot of Go players who would think that doing that would give themselves a considerable advantage. Though, I guess I don't know many players who play with, or I guess I don't know a lot of people who play live very often. So these are all very interesting questions. I really enjoyed thinking about stuff like this. I would love to know other listeners' thoughts about stuff like this as well. But again, yeah, I think using the stones to flip it over and try to mark certain situations, it's kind of 50-50. Half of it is like, yeah, I don't think that should really be allowed. Half of it's like, I also don't think it's super, super useful. But anyway, thanks for writing in. Heath writes, binging my way through episodes, but wanted to share a style of teaching I've picked up from various people around the Seattle Go Center, as I've been volunteering at multiple festivals/events and teaching. Don't feel you have to read all this, but go ahead and paraphrase whatever you'd like, or if you'd ever revisit teaching in an episode, feel free to use. First, I have the new person tell me the rules and just clarify the rules as needed. After all, Go was discovered, not invented. Place a stone on the board, intersections. A stone can be captured if surrounded, how you would surround a stone, liberties. So if partially surrounded, Atari, how would you escape? Stones don't move, extend. How would the two stones be captured now? Shared liberties. Quick demo of side and corner liberties, dangerous closer to the edge. Now simplest game, black wall through middle and white against it. Who wins? Territory. Okay, now know how to play. Shall we have a game? Okay, these are pretty good steps outlining all the essential pieces of knowledge you need in order to actually play a game of stones. It sounds like a good process. So for the game we play on 7x7, if they play in the middle, I'm in a losing game. Good, start. Third line, I usually do similar move. Anything else, reiterate danger of the edge. Most games are quick and simple as they are sort of guided to build the wall. Aggressive players, I will play slow moves, proving the futility of the attacks, but usually leaving them able to seal me. What's great is they're surprised at having won, and it's an honest play win. Some will want more details on how they won, and I might explain Komi and how, if we were evenly skilled, they would be expected to beat me by 9 points to win. That's a funny thing in terms of what their surprise is at having won, because when I played my fiance and I would capture some of her stones, giving her the rest of the board. I would be letting her win by capturing some measly stones so that I could just kind of settle myself somewhere, and giving her the entire rest of the board. She would get angry at me for capturing her stones, and she just wants to capture stones. She doesn't care about territory. She doesn't care about winning. She'd rather kill me, which is funny, but this is an interesting thing that happens with some beginners. Continuing, I don't play to confuse them. Eventually we'll move up to a 9x9, and then I'll progress to handicap. You know, it's interesting you start on a 7x7. I've never heard that before. I'm pretty sure it's quite cramped, but it's probably good for explaining the initial principles. Koz and Seki I avoid in the first few games or explain as it comes up. The main thing is to get to play soon, quick games, and not dominating them. Now each person is different, of course, but this early conversation of the rules versus the info dump I used to do gives me a different way to engage the other person and feel them out. Doing mass teaching like this, it's also good when we can pair beginners up once they know the rules. Yeah, I agree. The rules dump really, even when you're playing board games, when I'm playing board games, I'm designated as the person to read the rules for everybody, and I've noticed that I will basically have to read the entire rule set so I can put the entire game in my brain before I can start explaining to other people. But it's not effective to explain the game exactly the way I consumed the reading of the rules and just dump it on everybody. I have to demonstrate and show them like turn by turn, and that's the most effective way. So it's interesting that there's a parallel there. Just teaching by little, necessary nuggets of information is, I think, probably a good way to go. One last thing on teaching, it is extremely addictive. It gives you the chance to rediscover Go all over again through another person's eyes. I'm 8Q, but using the style of teaching here, nobody should feel too weak to introduce Go to another person. You'll find your rhythm and will have to mentally restrain yourself from asking people, do you want to learn how to play Go? It only takes 5 minutes. I'm in the process of making myself my own 13x13 with 7x7 on the back to have at work. I can do problems, Joseki on one side, but if anyone shows the slightest interest, I'll be in teacher mode. Keep up the good work, anything to spread the joy of Go. Heath. Thanks for writing in, Heath. That's a lot of interesting stuff that you wrote about teaching. It's cool that you're addicted to teaching and you have so many people you're able to teach. I wish I had some people to teach. I would love to teach more people how to play Go. And it's interesting, again, that you're doing this 7x7 and 13x13 thing, which, I guess 13x13 is pretty common, but the 7x7 is really throwing me off here. I've never actually tried any game on 7x7 before. But I think that's also another good strategy, is to take your Go board out and play somewhere where people can see you and people will ask you, oh, is that 5 in a row? Anyway, thanks for writing, Heath. Rach says, it might be my favorite episodes. Oh, this is regarding the Telegraph Go episode. Rach says, it might be my favorite episode so far. I really like this high-level abstract stuff that can completely change how you perceive the game. Such a change in perception would be very welcome for me personally. That is, thinking more about power than about territory. I think this is what I might need to get over my current plateau. That said, it is a bit confusing and not clearly explained in the discussion. At one point during the discussion, I thought that I had got it, but in the end, I was not so sure anymore. I'm again confused about power, influence, and thickness, and how those relate. Also, power is territory of sorts. I'd like to have a condensed, clearly stated explanation. That said, the general idea is one of the most interesting things I heard about Go for a while. Yeah, I think, you know what? I was confused as well, but it did make me think a lot, and I have been thinking about it as I have been playing my games. And I might need to, have it marinate in my brain for a while before I can maybe explain it clearly, or I would just have to maybe talk to Telegraph again to see what he really meant. But I think that maybe I'll save it for another episode. It's starting to open up a big can of worms in my head. But basically, I think he's saying that you have to consider. Actually, I have no idea. Sorry. It's been a while. Thanks for writing in, though. I'll try to let you know if I come up with a better explanation. John 160 says, if I understand Telegraph Go correctly here at 4449, the key takeaway that I think is quite easy to miss is that when you take away the corner with a 3-3, it does also affect the opponent's stones that are on the outside, because when the corner is gone, there is less place to make eyes for the opponent. This actually makes a lot of sense regarding the modern meta, and is also why I think in the modern 3-3 variation, you don't exchange the Hane and connect on the second line, because even though you gain territory, you give the opponent a much better shape in terms of eyes, so you give away too much power for not much territory gain. Okay, thanks for writing in, John. I think that definitely starts to describe a little bit about the what Telegraph was trying to say, and actually it kind of helps me, turn my cogs in my brain as well to try to take a stab at it myself. And I think one of the things he was emphasizing, yes, it got very confusing when we started considering territory as power as well, but I think from what I got from the conversation, he was emphasizing that you should not try to just cash everything out as a strategy to win, and instead look at the board and how much of an area you control in terms of power and influence. that's kind of like as simply as I could put it in terms of what I understood from that conversation. So hopefully that helps. ChiliNet writes, I would love to see Colossus's reaction to Telegraph Go saying cornerside center doesn't matter at all, and I hate that we teach that to beginners. Yeah, I mean, you know what? Any higher level education teaching establishment will have disagreements about pedagogy. Even in universities, the professors will constantly disagree with how they're teaching their students. So, I mean, it's great. A wealth of opinions is good. I think they both probably have their merits, and it's probably not just, sometimes, again, people use strong language. Telegraph's Go saying it's completely useless to consider cornerside center. He obviously is also not ignoring the fact that efficiency in an isolated situation, those stones will be better off with cornerside center, but he, I think, values some other things more than that. Thanks for writing in. And Jason Miller says, I haven't finished yet, but in cloud computing, instead of nouns and verbs, they will call it declarative versus imperative. A quote, imperative tells the computer how to do things, whereas declarative focuses on what we want to get from the computer. Interesting parallel. Let me think here. I think I don't know enough about cloud computing to really understand this, but it's always interesting to see the different parallels you can draw from different disciplines, and the fact that Telegraph Go's little spiel on nouns and verbs is helping you understand, or actually maybe the converse, where you're understanding the nouns and verbs thing from cloud computing is pretty cool. Thanks for writing in. And finally, Plixik writes, I listened to the Power Bit several times, but I don't get it. Let us know if you figure it out, Justin. I will let you know if I figure it out. Actually, I do have some thoughts on it. It's kind of like a branching thing, where I may not be talking about Telegraph Go's specific ideas, but he did inspire me to think about certain things in Go, and so maybe I'll share that with you in a future episode. But at the very least, I thought it was an interesting paradigm shift to just kind of think, what is really important? It's power. And maybe that's not something very concrete for a lot of people, but I actually have been thinking about my games from that perspective, and it has made me kind of reflect on it a lot. Although I have nothing concrete for you to share with you right now, unfortunately, but I will let you know. Thanks for writing in, Plixik. And the question of the week this week is, what has your experience been with Tsumego? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you have any approaches to Tsumego that were helpful? Let me know. And I also want to know, what are your favorite Tsumego sites and what's been the most effective for you? If you want to share your thoughts on this question, or if you have a Go story to share or have a question of your own, you can comment on YouTube or the Reddit post for this episode, or you can email me directly at starpointbaduk@gmail.com. That's starpointbaduk@gmail.com. If you're a YouTube listener, would greatly appreciate a like and subscribe. And if you're a podcast listener, a review and a rating would also help. Special thank you to Chris M., Jeffrey H., and John M. for supporting Starpoint. And I have a series of jokes for you lined up. And there's 3 jokes, and this is the first one. The other 2 I'm going to share with you in the next 2 episodes. The first one is, why did the Go player not make it through kindergarten? Because he couldn't count. Okay, that wasn't that funny, but it'll build up. This is a slow burn, okay? Thanks for listening. Keep playing Go.